In the 41st millennium, hope is the rarest commodity in the galaxy, rarer than adamantium, rarer than functional STC fragments, rarer even than a world untouched by war. The Imperium of man endures through faith in a corpse god, and the brutal calculus that 1 billion deaths today might forestall 10 billion tomorrow. Into this darkness, where pragmatism has devoured idealism for 10,000 years, fell something that should not exist. A being for whom hope was not a luxury, but a fundamental law of existence. Fleet Quintus of the Indomitus Crusade held position in high orbit above Sotha, the ancient world that had once housed the Pharos device. Lord Commander Roboute Guilliman stood on the bridge of the Macragge's honor, reviewing strategic projections for the next phase of his impossible task, stitching together an Imperium that had festered in his absence. The 13th Primarch's enhanced mind processed fleet disposition reports, Mechanicus resource assessments, and astropathic communiques with the cold efficiency that had made him the Imperium's greatest administrator. Then reality screamed. Alarms shrieked across every deck as the Macragge's Honor's auger arrays registered an impossible energy signature. Not a warp translation. The Geller field interactions were all wrong. Not a webway breach. No psychic backwash preceded it. Something was tearing through the skin of reality itself with pure kinetic force, and it was decelerating. Auger analysis! Guilliman's voice cut through the controlled chaos of the bridge. Lord Commander, we register a single object, roughly humanoid proportions, generating massive thermal emissions, the senior auger officer reported, his augmetic eye whirring as it processed data streams. Velocity decreasing from 0.97 light speed. Energy signature is, my lord, it doesn't match any known classification. Through the crystalline viewports, Guilliman watched with eyes that could perceive wavelengths beyond human capacity. A blue and red comet was visible against the black, wreathed in flames that had nothing to do with atmospheric entry. The thing was bleeding speed with impossible precision, adjusting its trajectory with minute bursts of something. Not thrust, not gravitational manipulation. Raw kinetic adjustment, as if physics were politely accommodating its preferences. Weapon status, Guilliman commanded. Lance batteries tracking, my lord. Bombardment cannons acquiring solution. The Primarch raised one ceramite-clad hand. Hold fire. If it intended to strike us, we would already be debris. His tactical intuition, honed across 3 centuries of the Great Crusade, whispered that this was no attack. This was an arrival, possibly an accident. The object's deceleration became visible even to unaugmented eyes as it approached Sotha's upper atmosphere. Guilliman's superhuman vision caught details that made his twin hearts beat faster. Humanoid, definitely humanoid, approximately 2 meters tall. No visible armor, yet surviving velocities that would vaporize ceramite. The thermal bloom suggested internal temperatures that should have reduced organic matter to constituent atoms. Vox all channels, Guilliman ordered. Unknown entity. This is Roboute Guilliman, Lord Commander of the Imperium of Man. Identify yourself and state your purpose, or you will be fired upon. For 3 seconds, only static answered. Then a voice emerged from the Vox speakers, clear, steady, touched with confusion, but not fear. I don't know where this is. My name is Kal-El. I mean no harm. I'm trying to understand what happened. The voice spoke flawless Gothic, though the augur officer's linguistic cogitator flagged microscopic pronunciation anomalies, suggesting the speaker had learned the language seconds ago by listening to the Vox transmission. Guilliman's eyes narrowed. Instantaneous linguistic acquisition suggested either sophisticated translation technology or a cognitive processing capacity that rivaled a Primarch's. "You will proceed to Hangar Bay Tertius 7, Guilliman transmitted. "Reduce velocity to below 50 meters per second. Any deviation from the transmitted approach vector will be interpreted as hostile action. Comply immediately." "Understood. I'm coming in peacefully." The figure, Kal-El, adjusted course with unsettling grace. No visible thrusters, no anti-grav emissions. He simply moved, as if momentum were a suggestion he could choose to ignore. Guilliman watched the entity descend toward the Macraga's Honor's designated hangar bay, his strategic mind already calculating contingencies. "Secure Hangar Tertius 7, he commanded. "Full Victrix Guard deployment. Null field generators at maximum. Containment protocols, Sigma adamant. I want apothecaries standing by with gene sequencing equipment and tech marines with full spectrum analysis suites." Captain Sicarius, standing at attention nearby, spoke carefully. "My lord, shall I prepare termination protocols?" Guilliman considered the question as he strode toward the hangar bay, his ceremonite-clad footsteps echoing through the corridor. 20 Victrix Guard fell into formation around him, their power armor painted in ultramarines blue and gold, storm shields locked and power swords ready. "Prepare them," Guilliman replied, "but I suspect conventional termination may prove challenging." Through the internal Vox network, he heard the hangar bay's atmospheric containment fields hum to life. Whatever this Kal-El was, Xenos bioweapon, chaos construct, dark age technological remnant, it would be contained, analyzed, and if necessary, destroyed. The Imperium had no room for unknowns, not anymore. But as Guilliman approached the hangar bay blast doors, something unprecedented stirred in his genetically enhanced consciousness. Curiosity untainted by threat assessment. This entity had decelerated from near light speed without generating a warp signature. It had survived temperatures that exceeded plasma weaponry. It had learned Gothic in seconds. The Lord Commander of the Imperium had seen many impossible things in his long life, but he had never seen anything quite like this. If you crave stories where demigods clash with alien ideals and the fate of the Imperium hangs in the balance, smash that subscribe button. The Emperor protects those who bear witness to the dark millennium. The blast doors opened. The hangar bay's null field generators created a subtle distortion in the air, a shimmer like heat haze that marked the boundaries of psychic suppression. Guilliman had ordered maximum output, enough to render even sanctioned psychers unconscious. If this entity relied on warp-based abilities, it would be neutralized immediately. Kal-El descended through the atmospheric containment field without hesitation. The moment he crossed the threshold, Guilliman's enhanced senses cataloged everything. 2 meters tall, perhaps slightly more. Humanoid physiognomy, 2 arms, 2 legs, bilateral symmetry. Musculature visible beneath a form-fitting blue suit, marked with an unfamiliar red and yellow symbol on the chest. No visible weapons, no armor plating. Dark hair, somehow perfectly composed despite atmospheric entry. And eyes, blue eyes that swept across the assembled Victrix guard with neither fear nor aggression, only assessment and something that might have been concern. The entity touched down on the deck plating with surprising gentleness. Guilliman noted the way the ceramite floor didn't crack despite the object's velocity. Controlled deceleration at the molecular level, perhaps, or gravitational manipulation so precise it appeared absent. "I appreciate you not shooting," Kal-El said, raising both hands in a gesture of peace that transcended cultures. "I know this looks strange. I'm trying to understand where I am." Guilliman stepped forward, the armor of Fate's systems humming as they analyzed the stranger. "You are aboard the Macraga's Honor, flagship of the Ultramarines chapter. You have entered Imperial space without authorization during a time of galaxy-spanning war. You will submit to questioning." "I don't want trouble," the entity replied. His tone carried absolute sincerity, a quality Guilliman had learned to distrust after millennia of dealing with manipulators. "I was fighting someone when reality just tore open. Next thing I knew, I was here, wherever here is. You claim to have traversed dimensional barriers accidentally?" Guilliman's tactical assessment subroutines flagged this as either unprecedented technology or a carefully constructed deception. "Describe your origin." Kal-El's expression flickered with something complex. Loss, perhaps, or uncertainty. "I'm from Earth, a planet in a system you probably don't have charts for. I protect people. That's what I do." "Earth." Guilliman accessed his comprehensive historical databases, searching for matches. Nothing. Thousands of worlds bore similar names, but none generated recognition. "You claim to be a protector. Of what? For whom? Under whose authority?" "No one's authority. I protect people because it's right." The statement hung in the air like a grenade whose pin had been pulled but not yet released. 20 Victrix Guard stood ready to unleash hell at Guilliman's slightest gesture. Techmarine Vollis's Auspex was recording every word, every gesture, building a threat assessment matrix. Guilliman studied the entity for 3 full seconds, an eternity for a Primarch's cognitive processing. "You operate independently, without sanction from governmental authority? Without military chain of command?" His voice carried genuine confusion. The concept was strategically incoherent. "I work with authorities when it helps people," Kal-El said carefully. "But I don't take orders that conflict with doing what's right." Guilliman felt something he rarely experienced: intellectual dissonance. This entity either represented the most dangerous form of anarchic element imaginable, a superpowered individual accountable to no one, or it was lying with expert precision. "Demonstrate your capabilities," Guilliman commanded. "Lift that cargo container." He gestured toward a 15-ton munitions crate marked with Mechanicus hazard sigils. Kal-El walked to the container without hesitation. He placed both hands underneath and lifted. The crate rose smoothly, effortlessly, as if it weighed nothing. No strain showed on the entity's face. No servos whined. No anti-grav generators hummed. Pure muscular force, applied with casual precision. "Higher," Guilliman ordered. The entity raised the container above his head with one hand, holding it steady while the other remained free. Still no strain. Guilliman's gene-enhanced mind calculated force ratios. A space marine in power armor might manage such a feat with both hands and visible effort. This entity made it look trivial. Acceptable. Lower it. Kal-El set the container down without so much as a scrape against the deck plating. Perfect control. Guilliman added another data point to his assessment. This being possessed both overwhelming strength and remarkable restraint. A dangerous combination. You will remain aboard this vessel under observation, Guilliman stated. You will submit to medical examination, technological analysis, and detailed interrogation. You will answer all questions truthfully and completely. Non-compliance will result in immediate termination. Do you understand? Something shifted in Kal-El's expression. Not defiance exactly, but a quiet firmness that reminded Guilliman of his own brothers when they believed themselves absolutely right. I understand you're cautious. I respect that. But I'm not a prisoner, and I'm not a threat. I'll answer your questions, but I need information too. Where am I? What year is it? What's happening here? Guilliman's expression remained neutral, though internally he revised his threat assessment upward. This entity was intelligent, assertive, and fundamentally unwilling to submit to imposed authority despite its peaceful demeanor. That made it either the most valuable asset in the crusade or the most dangerous variable in a campaign that could not afford variables. You are in the 41st millennium, Guilliman said quietly. And if you truly wish to protect people, you have arrived in the galaxy that needs it most and is least equipped to trust it. The examination chamber was designed to contain demons. Hexagrammic wards covered every surface, inscribed by the finest librarians of the Ultramarines. Null field generators hummed at maximum output. 20 centimeters of adamantium plating separated the inner chamber from the rest of the ship. If something went wrong, the entire section could be jettisoned into the void in 2.3 seconds. Kal-El sat on a reinforced examination table that had been rated for containing chaos-corrupted space marines. He'd complied with every request so far. Blood samples, tissue scans, cognitive assessments. Apothecary Theron worked with methodical precision, his augmetic hands manipulating instruments that hissed and clicked as they analyzed the entity's biology. Guilliman observed from behind armored glass, Tech Marine Volus at his side. The initial results were already streaming across data slates, and each new finding made the Primarch's strategic calculus more complex. Cellular structure is completely foreign, Theron reported via Vox. No DNA as we understand it. A different base structure entirely. 4 primary components, but arranged in ways that shouldn't be stable. His cells absorb and store electromagnetic radiation with impossible efficiency. Blood chemistry includes elements I can't identify. His musculature operates on principles that violate known biological limitations. Xenos? Guilliman asked. Unknown classification. If Xenos, unlike any encountered in Imperial records, his baseline physiognomy is too close to human to be convergent evolution, yet too different to be gene modification. Guilliman watched Kal-El through the glass. The entity sat patiently, occasionally glancing around the chamber with those unsettling blue eyes. No signs of stress. Heart rate, yes, he had a heartbeat, singular, remained steady. No elevated cortisol analogs. Either he possessed perfect emotional control or genuinely felt no threat. Run structural integrity assessment protocol, Guilliman ordered. Theron nodded and approached Kal-El with a monomolecular cutting instrument. This may cause discomfort. Please remain still. What are you doing? Kal-El asked, though he didn't move. Testing dermal resistance. Theron activated the blade and pressed it against Kal-El's exposed forearm with precisely calibrated pressure, enough to slice through Space Marine ceramite. The blade snapped. Theron stared at the broken instrument, then at Kal-El's unmarked skin. Increasing pressure. He retrieved a diamond-tipped industrial cutting tool used for breaching starship hulls, applied it to the same location. The diamond tip shattered into powder. My lord, Theron's Vox transmission carried barely controlled astonishment. His skin is impervious to molecular edge cutting. I recommend we test impact resistance. Guilliman considered the proposal. Proceed, low-yield munitions only. That won't be necessary, Kal-El interrupted, standing from the examination table. I understand you need information, but I'm not interested in being shot. It was not a request, Guilliman replied through the Vox speaker. For the first time, something flickered in Kal-El's eyes. Not anger precisely, but disappointment. I said no. I'm cooperating because I understand your position. But I'm not a test subject you can experiment on indefinitely. Guilliman's hand moved to the hand of Dominion, his armored gauntlet that could crush tank armor. You are aboard my vessel in Imperial space during wartime. You possess capabilities that could threaten fleet security. You will comply with all assessment protocols, or... The examination table buckled. Not from external force, but from Kal-El gripping it with one hand while maintaining eye contact with Guilliman. The reinforced metal crumpled like parchment. Or what? Kal-El asked quietly. You'll shoot me? Imprison me? I'm trying to be reasonable here, but I'm not your property. I've answered your questions. I've submitted to your tests. What I won't do is let you treat me like an enemy when I've done nothing hostile. Guilliman watched the crushed metal drip from Kal-El's hand. The entity had just demonstrated the ability to destroy ship infrastructure with casual effort while simultaneously verbalizing restraint. A contradiction that should have been tactically incoherent, yet felt disturbingly genuine. You claim to be a protector, Guilliman said, his voice dropping to the tone he'd used when negotiating with particularly dangerous warlords during the Great Crusade. Yet you resist the protocols designed to ensure you pose no threat to those you claim to protect. I resist being treated as a weapon instead of a person, Kal-El countered. There's a difference between caution and dehumanization. You are not human. Neither are you. The observation landed like an artillery shell. Guilliman felt his brother's presence in his mind, their voices, their certainties, their failures. He was enhanced beyond humanity, created to lead it, but forever separate from it. This entity understood that isolation instinctively. Guilliman made a decision that would have horrified the Inquisition. Apothecary Theron, cease invasive testing. Kal-El, you will accompany me to the Strategium. We will discuss your situation as equals, provisionally. Thank you, Kal-El said, and the gratitude sounded genuine. As Guilliman ordered the examination chamber opened, Tech Marine Volus leaned close. My lord, we haven't determined his full capabilities. He could be a threat. He is absolutely a threat, Guilliman replied. Which is why keeping him hostile would be catastrophically poor strategy. The strategium of the Macraga's honor was a cathedral of war. Hololithic displays projected the Imperium Nihilus in flickering blue light, a galaxy bisected by the cicatrix maledictum, bleeding from 1,000 wounds. Guilliman stood before the largest projection, his gauntleted fingers manipulating data streams with practiced efficiency. Kal-El stood beside him, no longer under guard, but still observed by a dozen autonomous gun servitors hidden in the chamber's architecture. The entity studied the galactic map with visible concern, his eyes tracking the red markers that indicated active war zones, chaos incursions, Xenos invasions. "This is the Imperium of Man," Guilliman explained, his voice carrying the weight of 10,000 years. 1 million worlds, give or take the thousands we lose each year. 1 quadrillion human souls, though that number becomes meaningless at such scale. We are beset on all sides. Chaos from the warp, Xenos from without, heresy from within. 1 million worlds, Kal-El repeated quietly. How many are at war right now? Guilliman's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes acknowledged the question's insight. Approximately 400,000 are experiencing active conflict. Another 300,000 face imminent threat. The remainder are either preparing for war, recovering from war, or will be at war before this conversation ends. That's, Kal-El trailed off, his face reflecting genuine horror. That's unsustainable. It has been sustained for 10 millennia, Guilliman replied. Because the alternative is extinction. He gestured, and in the hololithic display zoomed toward a small cluster of worlds near the Satha system. 7 planets, color-coded by strategic value. 3 were marked green, stable, productive, properly defended. 4 were amber, contested, under threat, requiring intervention. I have insufficient forces to defend all Imperial holdings in this sector, Guilliman continued, his tone clinical. Therefore, I must choose. These 3 worlds, he highlighted them, produce vital war materiel. Their loss would cripple fleet operations for 5 years. These 4 worlds are agricultural centers feeding 14 billion souls across adjacent systems. Kal-El studied the display. You're choosing between them. I am allocating resources to maximize strategic advantage and minimize acceptable losses. The 3 industrial worlds receive fleet protection. The 4 agricultural worlds receive evacuation protocols and scorched earth orders to deny resources to the enemy. Evacuation protocols? Kal-El's voice sharpened. How many people? Guilliman pulled up casualty projections. Optimistically, 40% of the population, approximately 22 billion souls. The remainder will be lost when chaos forces overrun the planets. We will then execute exterminatus to prevent demonic consolidation. The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. You're planning to abandon 8 billion people and then destroy their worlds, Kal-El said slowly, his voice carefully controlled. Because you don't have enough ships. Because I have insufficient resources to defend both strategic objectives simultaneously, Guilliman corrected. This is the calculus of warfare at galactic scale. Every commander faces it. I simply face it 10,000 times per day. Kal-El turned to face him fully. What if you had more resources? What if someone could reinforce those agricultural worlds while your fleet protected the industrial ones? Guilliman's enhanced mind immediately ran the tactical permutations. If a force of sufficient strength could hold 4 contested worlds against projected chaos incursions, while my fleet secured the industrial corridor, yes, the strategic equation changes, but I have no such force available. You do now. The statement hung between them like a challenge and an offer simultaneously. Guilliman studied Kal-El with the same intensity he'd once reserved for evaluating his brother Primarchs before battle. The entity possessed demonstrated superhuman strength, apparent invulnerability, a flight capability, and most importantly, the conviction of someone who believed impossible things were merely difficult. You propose to defend 4 worlds simultaneously? Guilliman's voice carried skepticism honed by 3 centuries of warfare. Against chaos incursions projected at 6,000 cultists, corrupted guard regiments, and demon manifestations? Alone? I faced worse odds. Kal-El's confidence wasn't arrogance. It was the quiet certainty of someone who'd done impossible things before. Tell me about your enemy. What am I facing? Guilliman gestured, and tactical data flooded the display. Kal-El absorbed it with unsettling speed, his eyes tracking information streams that would overwhelm even Space Marine cogitators. After 40 seconds, he spoke. They're using corrupted humans as shock troops, supported by entities that violate physical laws. The corruption spreads through psychological manipulation and exposure to, what did you call it, the warp? A parallel dimension of pure psychic energy where emotion and belief become tangible, Guilliman explained. Humanity's collective suffering has birthed 4 entities of terrible power, the Chaos Gods. They seek to corrupt all reality. Kal-El's jaw tightened. And you fight them by destroying worlds? When necessary to prevent greater corruption, yes. There has to be another way. Guilliman felt something he hadn't experienced in decades, the urge to laugh bitterly. Another way. 10,000 years of warfare, the greatest military minds in human history. The Emperor's own strategic genius. And you believe there's another way we simply haven't considered. I think you've been fighting so long you've forgotten what you're fighting for, Kal-El said quietly. Those 8 billion people aren't acceptable losses. There are 8 billion reasons to find a solution instead of settling for the least terrible option. The Lord Commander of the Imperium stared at this entity from beyond the stars. This creature who spoke of hope as if it were tactically viable, who looked at strategic impossibility and saw merely a difficult problem. If you fail, Guilliman said slowly, those 8 billion die anyway, and I will have wasted fleet resources trusting an unknown variable. Then let me prove I'm not a variable, Kal-El replied. Let me show you what's possible when you don't accept that billions must die. Guilliman made his decision. The agricultural world of Hecta Secundus burned beneath a sky the color of infected wounds. The warp rift above the northern continent pulsed with sickly light as reality tore itself apart, vomiting corruption onto soil that had fed billions for 3,000 years. Kal-El descended through atmosphere thick with ash and worse things, particles of unreality that his enhanced vision could perceive twisting the fabric of space. His body absorbed solar radiation greedily, though the star here felt different from Sul. Weaker somehow, or perhaps the light was filtered through layers of pollution that choked every imperial world he'd observed. Below, panicked civilians fled toward evacuation transports, while cultists, former Imperial citizens twisted by chaos, pursued with weapons and something far worse: faith in dark gods who answered prayers. Kal-El's telescopic vision showed him everything at once: families separated in the crush, children trampled, elderly abandoned because they couldn't move fast enough. He'd seen disasters before: natural catastrophes, alien invasions, supervillain attacks. But there was something uniquely horrifying about watching humans hunt other humans with religious ecstasy painted on their corrupted faces. Kal-El moved. Supersonic flight through atmosphere generated a thunderclap that rolled across the battlefield like divine judgment. He struck the cultist front line, moving at speeds that turned air into plasma, his fists finding targets with precision that came from years of restraint training. Every blow calculated, hard enough to incapacitate, controlled enough not to kill. He'd made that promise to himself long ago. Cultists flew backward, bones broken but bodies intact. Kal-El worked through their ranks like a scalpel, disarming, disabling, creating a corridor of safety for the fleeing civilians. His heat vision carved through improvised barricades without touching flesh. His freeze breath disabled weapons without freezing the hands that held them. 30 seconds, 300 cultists neutralized, 0 casualties. Then reality screamed, and something impossible stepped through the warp rift. The demon towered 4 meters tall, its form a contradiction of biology and nightmare. Flesh that wasn't flesh. Claws that existed in more dimensions than 3. Eyes that perceived not light, but sin and weakness. It looked at Kal-El and laughed with a voice that bypassed ears to echo directly in the mind. "The incorruptible angel," it hissed in a language Kal-El shouldn't understand, but did. "The righteous one, we have waited for you, Kal-El of the dead world. Your virtue burns so bright in this darkness. Let us see if it burns hot enough to survive our touch." Kal-El felt something probe at his thoughts, oily, invasive, searching for purchase. Memories of failure, moments of doubt, the weight of every person he couldn't save. The demon fed on these things, magnifying them, trying to transform regret into despair. But Kal-El had fought psychic attacks before. Martian Manhunter had trained him in mental defenses. He compartmentalized, focused on the immediate, pushed back against the invasion with pure force of will. The demon recoiled, genuinely surprised. "You resist? Fascinating. Then let us test your flesh instead." It moved with impossible speed, faster than Kal-El had seen any enemy move. Claws raked across his chest, and for the first time since arriving in this universe, he felt pain. Not the sting of broken blades or shattered diamonds. Real pain, as if those claws cut something deeper than skin. Kal-El responded instinctively. His fist connected with the demon's center mass with force that would shatter a mountain. The entity flew backward, crashed through 3 buildings, and laughed harder. "Yes, more. Your strength feeds me, little angel. Every blow is a prayer to violence. Every broken bone in those cultists is a sacrifice to our cause. You fight with righteousness, but righteousness is just another form of pride. And pride is ours." The word struck harder than the claws. Kal-El glanced at the cultists he'd incapacitated. Broken limbs, shattered ribs. He'd been gentle by his standards, but gentle still meant bones broken. Had he enjoyed it? That moment of justified violence against those who chose corruption? The demon smiled, reading his hesitation. There it is, the doubt, the recognition that you are not so different from us. You impose your will through force. You decide who deserves mercy and who deserves pain. You are judge, jury, and executioner, playing God over beings you deem lesser. I'm nothing like you, Kal-El growled, but the conviction wavered. Prove it, the demon whispered. Save them all, every cultist you gently broke, every civilian cowering in the ruins, every soul on this world. Save them without violence. Save them with your precious virtue. Or admit that you are simply another tyrant who happens to call himself good. Kal-El felt the weight of 8 billion lives pressing down. The demon was right about one thing. He had used violence. Controlled, measured, necessary violence. But violence nonetheless. In his universe, that was acceptable because the alternative was worse. Here, in this nightmare galaxy, what was acceptable? The demon charged again, and this time Kal-El didn't meet it with force. He dodged, using speed instead of strength, looking for an alternative. The entity's claws carved furrows in the ground where he'd stood microseconds before. Running? How heroic. Not running, Kal-El said. Thinking. He flew upward, drawing the daemon away from the civilians. It pursued, cackling with delight. Kal-El's mind raced through options. This thing violated physics. It couldn't be physically destroyed by conventional means. But it had form, which meant it required energy to maintain that form. Energy that came from somewhere. The warp rift pulsed above, feeding the demon. Kal-El's eyes began to glow red. Heat vision won't harm me, Angel. I am eternal. Kal-El didn't aim at the demon. He aimed at the warp rift itself, pouring concentrated solar energy into the tear in reality. Not to seal it. He didn't understand it well enough, but to disrupt it, to introduce chaos into chaos itself. The rift flickered. The daemon shrieked, its form destabilizing. Clever, it hissed as it began to dissolve. But cleverness is just another form of pride. We will meet again, Kal-El. And next time, you will understand that in this universe, mercy is the fastest path to damnation. It vanished, leaving only the stench of sulfur and the echo of mocking laughter. Kal-El descended to the evacuation site, where Imperial Guard soldiers stared at him with expressions mixing awe and terror. He'd saved them. But he hadn't saved them the way he'd wanted to. And the demon's words lingered like poison. The observation deck of the Macraga's Honor provided an unobstructed view of Hecta Secundus below. Kal-El stood before the viewport, still wearing his suit, now scorched in places where demonic claws had touched it. The fabric was already repairing itself, absorbing solar radiation to knit microscopic damage. Behind him, Guilliman reviewed after-action reports on a data slate, his expression unreadable. Civilian evacuation efficiency increased by 47% in sectors where you operated, the Primarch said, without looking up. Cultist casualties, 0. Imperial Guard casualties in your operational area, 0. Demon manifestations, neutralized or dispersed. By any tactical metric, your performance was exemplary. But, Kal-El asked, still staring at the planet. But you returned troubled. Guilliman set down the data slate and approached. The demon spoke to you. They always do. What did it say? Kal-El turned to face him. It said I was just another tyrant, imposing my will through violence. that breaking bones in the name of good doesn't make me different from those who break bones for evil. And you believe it? I don't know. The admission cost him something. Where I come from, I work with law enforcement, with governments, with systems designed to administer justice. Here, I'm just doing what I think is right based on my judgment alone. Who gave me that authority? Guilliman's expression shifted. Not quite sympathy, but recognition of familiar doubt. I have asked myself similar questions for 300 years. I was created by the Emperor to conquer the galaxy in humanity's name. I never questioned whether humanity wanted to be conquered. I simply executed my purpose with maximum efficiency. He gestured toward the viewport, toward the Imperium beyond. 10,000 years later, I returned to find that efficiency had calcified into tyranny. The crusade I fought became an endless meat grinder. The hope I represented became ashes and prayers to a corpse god. And I wonder, if I had questioned my purpose then, might things be different now? You're saying I should doubt myself? Kal-El asked. I'm saying doubt is the price of conscience, Guilliman replied. The demon wanted to paralyze you with it. Instead, let it sharpen your judgment. You broke bones because it was the minimum force required to save lives. That calculation, balancing harm prevented against harm inflicted, is the burden of those with power. Kal-El considered this. In my universe, I have limits, laws, accountability. Superman can't just decide how the world should work. Yet you do decide every time you act, Guilliman observed. You chose which people to save first. You chose how much force to use. You chose to protect strangers in a universe not your own. These are decisions only you could make, based on judgment only you possess. That is the loneliness of power, Kal-El. No law can tell you whether to save the child or the hospital. You simply choose and live with the consequences. The words settled like stones in Kal-El's chest. He'd always known this intellectually, but here, in a universe where every choice seemed to involve impossible trade-offs, the weight felt different. The other agricultural worlds, Kal-El said after a moment. Your projection showed 3 more under threat. I can help. Guilliman studied him with those calculating eyes that missed nothing. The demons will target you specifically now. They recognize you as a psychological threat, a being who operates on principles antithetical to chaos. They will attempt to corrupt you, break you, or turn your virtues into weapons against you. Let them try. They are very good at what they do, Guilliman warned. I have seen saints fall to chaos. I have watched paragons of virtue become the vilest heretics. Your moral clarity makes you powerful, but it also makes you vulnerable. In chaos corrupts through certainty as often as through doubt. Kal-El met his gaze directly. Then I'll have to be careful about what I'm certain of. A Vox alert interrupted them. Captain Sicarius's voice crackled through the communication system. My lord, urgent communique from Inquisitor Covenant. She demands immediate audience regarding the Xenos entity. Guilliman's jaw tightened microscopically. A Kal-El's enhanced perception caught easily. Inform the Inquisitor. I will meet her in 1 hour. She insists on immediate 1 hour. Guilliman severed the connection and turned back to Kal-El. The Inquisition has taken notice of you. They are the Emperor's holy enforcers, empowered to root out heresy, mutation, and Xenos contamination by any means necessary. To them, you represent all 3. What do they want? To determine whether you are a tool to be used or a threat to be eliminated, Guilliman said bluntly. Inquisitor Covenant is particularly zealous. She will not be satisfied with my assurances of your utility. She will demand proof of your loyalty to the Emperor and the Imperium. I'm not loyal to your Emperor, Kal-El said carefully. I don't know him. I'm loyal to the principle of protecting innocent people. If that aligns with your Imperium's goals, we can work together. If it doesn't, then we have a problem, Guilliman finished. Because the Inquisition does not negotiate with Xenos. They purge them. Kal-El's eyes hardened. I don't want conflict with your people, but I won't submit to execution because someone decided I don't fit their categories. I know. Guilliman turned toward the exit. Which is why you will attend this meeting, and you will demonstrate restraint even if provoked. Inquisitor Covenant has the authority to call for exterminatus on worlds she deems corrupted. Imagine what she would do with someone like you if she perceived you as a threat to Imperial stability. Are you asking me to play nice with someone who might try to kill me? Guilliman paused at the doorway. I'm asking you to remember that she believes she serves humanity's survival, just as you do, just as I do. The question is whether we can find common ground before she decides that humanity's survival requires your termination. Inquisitor Katarina Covenant was not an imposing figure by physical standards. She stood perhaps 1.7 meters tall, unaugmented, clad in black power armor, adorned with purity seals and the stylized eye of the Inquisition. Her age was indeterminate. Rejuvenate treatments could preserve youth for centuries, but her eyes carried the weight of someone who had witnessed horrors and responded by becoming something harder than adamantium. She entered the strategium flanked by 2 death cult assassins and a crusader bearing a power sword and storm shield. Her retinue took position with practiced efficiency, creating overlapping fields of fire that covered every approach to their mistress. Kal-El stood beside Guilliman, deliberately keeping his posture non-threatening. He'd faced government officials, military tribunals, and oversight committees before. This felt different. Covenant's gaze carried the weight of absolute conviction, the certainty of someone who had exterminated millions and called it necessary. Lord Commander, Covenant said, her voice crisp and precise. I have reviewed your reports regarding this entity. I find your conclusions dangerously optimistic. My conclusions are based on observed data and tactical assessment, Guilliman replied evenly. Kal-El has demonstrated both capability and restraint. His intervention on Hector Secundus saved 14 billion souls who would otherwise be lost. Or he has demonstrated sufficient cunning to earn your trust before revealing his true nature, Covenant countered. She turned her attention fully to Kal-El, her augmetic eye whirring as it analyzed him. You claim to be from another dimension. You possess abilities that violate known physics. You demonstrate resistance to warp corruption that should be impossible for non-sanctified entities. You speak of protecting humanity while refusing to acknowledge the Emperor's divinity. I've never claimed to be human, Kal-El said carefully. I protect people because it's the right thing to do, not because of religious conviction. Righteousness without faith is heresy, Covenant stated, as if citing fundamental law. The Emperor is humanity's salvation. All who serve humanity serve him, whether they acknowledge it or not. Your refusal to recognize this suggests either dangerous ignorance or willful blasphemy. Kal-El felt his jaw tighten, but kept his voice level. I respect that you believe your emperor is important. But I don't worship anyone. I act based on principles, not divine mandate. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Covenant's hand moved fractionally toward the bolt pistol at her hip, a gesture Kal-El's enhanced perception caught easily. You claim moral authority independent of the Emperor's will, Covenant said softly, dangerously. You place your judgment above the Imperium's 10,000-year tradition. You are, by definition, a rogue element accountable to no one. History teaches us what becomes of such elements. They become tyrants, warlords, or worse. History also teaches what becomes of unchecked authority, Kal-El replied. I've seen governments fall to corruption. I've watched power concentrate until it crushed everything it claimed to protect. If your Imperium demands I surrender my conscience to its authority, then we're going to have a problem. We already have a problem. Covenant's voice carried absolute certainty. You are Xenos. The Imperium's policy toward Xenos is unambiguous. He has saved more Imperial lives in 3 days than most Guard regiments save in a year, Guilliman interrupted, his voice carrying unmistakable warning. Your concerns are noted, Inquisitor, but operational authority in this sector remains mine. I have determined that Kal-El represents a strategic asset. Strategic assets can become strategic liabilities, Covenant countered, without breaking eye contact with Kal-El. I propose a test. If this entity truly serves humanity's interests, let him prove it. What kind of test? Kal-El asked. Covenant manipulated a control interface, and the hololithic display shifted to show a new star system. A single planet, marked with red threat indicators and the black skull of exterminatus consideration. Typhon's Reach, Covenant explained, a hive world of 18 billion souls, 80% of whom have fallen to Genestealer cult corruption. We detected Tyranid bioships in system 3 days ago. Within a week, the planet will be consumed, and those 18 billion will become biomass for the Hive fleet. Standard protocol demands exterminatus before the Tyranids can harvest the population. You're going to destroy the planet, Kal-El said, horror creeping into his voice. Kill 18 billion people to deny them to the enemy. We are preventing 18 billion corpses from becoming weapons against the Imperium, Covenant corrected coldly. This is mercy of a sort. The alternative is allowing the Tyranids to absorb their genetic material and spawn horrors that will consume 100 other worlds. Kal-El looked at Guilliman. You agree with this? The Primarch's expression was granite. I agree that allowing the Tyranids to feed is strategically indefensible. The calculus is brutally simple. 18 billion lives against trillions. There's still 3 billion uninfected people down there, Kal-El protested. 3 billion who don't deserve to die for something they didn't choose. Indeed, Covenant said, and something almost like satisfaction crossed her features. Which brings me to my test. If you can evacuate those 3 billion before the Tyranids arrive and ensure no significant biomass remains for harvest, without requiring fleet resources that would compromise other strategic objectives, then I will acknowledge your value to the Imperium. Fail, and I will recommend your immediate termination as a dangerous variable we cannot afford. Kal-El stared at the hololithic display. 3 billion people, 1 week. Tyrannid bioships closing fast. It was impossible by any reasonable standard. The evacuation infrastructure alone would require thousands of transports the Imperium didn't have. "And if I succeed?" he asked. "Then perhaps," Covenant said carefully, "you are the miracle this Imperium desperately needs. Or perhaps you are simply delaying the inevitable. Either way, we will have our answer." Guilliman watched the exchange with calculated silence. Kal-El realized this was a test for both of them. Covenant was measuring whether the Lord Commander's judgment had been compromised by desperation for hope. "I'll do it," Kal-El said, "but not for your approval. I'll do it because 3 billion people deserve someone trying to save them instead of writing them off as acceptable losses." Covenant's smile was cold and sharp. "Motivation is irrelevant. Results are all that matter. You have 1 week, Xenos. Prove your value or die proving your threat." Typhon's reach was dying by degrees. The Hive world's 17 continent-spanning cities stretched toward a polluted sky, their spires corroded and their foundations trembling as the Genestealer cult's uprising consumed infrastructure from within. Kal-El descended through toxic atmosphere, his enhanced vision cataloging the catastrophe below. 15 billion cultists had already transformed, their human features warped by Xenos genetics. 3 billion uninfected humans remained, trapped in fortified enclaves, hiding in sealed underhive sections, or fighting desperate last stands against former neighbors who now worshipped approaching alien gods. 7 days to evacuate 3 billion people. No Imperial transport capacity, no fleet support, just him. Kal-El had moved fast before, saved falling aircraft, stopped runaway trains, prevented dam collapses. But this was different. This wasn't one disaster with a single solution. This was 3 billion individual rescue operations spread across an entire planet, with hostile forces actively trying to prevent evacuation. He started with the largest concentration, Hive Primus, where 800 million uninfected citizens had barricaded themselves in the upper spires. The PDF forces were running low on ammunition, their last Vox transmission a prayer to an emperor who wouldn't answer in time. Kal-El could answer faster. He hit the cultist siege lines at supersonic velocity, the sonic boom shattering improvised barricades and scattering attackers like leaves. His heat vision carved through bio-corrupted war machines the cultists had constructed from stolen industrial equipment. Freeze breath sealed breaches in the defensive perimeter. In 90 seconds, he'd broken a siege that would have collapsed within the hour. The PDF commander, a scarred woman missing her left arm, stared at him with exhaustion and disbelief. "What? Who are you?" "Someone here to help. I need you to organize your people into groups of 1,000, tight formations. I'm getting you off this planet." "Off? The entire planet? That's impossible." "Watch me." Kal-El's plan was brutally simple. He would carry them to orbit. Not all at once. His strength was enormous, but not infinite. Groups of 1,000 at a time, using his speed to make hundreds of trips per day. He'd calculated the math during descent. If he maintained optimal velocity and minimized rest periods, he could theoretically complete 847 trips daily. 3 billion people divided by 1,000 per trip equals 3 million trips. 3 million divided by 847 trips per day equals 3,542 days. The math was crushing. He had 7 days. Kal-El felt the weight of impossibility pressing down. 3 billion people deserved rescue, but physics and time didn't care about deserving, unless he flew higher, breaking atmosphere until Typhon's reach became a sphere below. His telescopic vision scanned the planet's surface, identifying every pocket of uninfected humans. His superhearing filtered through billions of voices, isolating calls for help, prayers, final messages. His mind, enhanced by Kryptonian neurology absorbing yellow sun radiation, processed it all simultaneously. He needed to be in 1,000 places at once. He couldn't, but he could move fast enough that it might not matter. Kal-El became a blue and red blur. He hit the upper atmosphere at velocities that turned air into plasma, the friction heating his skin to temperatures that would vaporize lesser beings. He descended to Hive Secundus, gathered another 1,000 survivors, carried them to orbital rendezvous points where Guilliman had positioned minimal skeleton crews on automated platforms, descended again to Hive Tertius, again to Hive Quartus, again. 18 hours without rest, 240,000 people evacuated, a statistical miracle, a mathematical impossibility away from success. His body ached in ways it hadn't since fighting Darkseid. The star here wasn't Sol. Its radiation kept him functional, but couldn't fully replenish the energy he was burning. Every flight cycle depleted reserves faster than they recharged. His vision blurred slightly at the edges. His muscles screamed protests, his Kryptonian physiology usually silenced. He pushed harder. Day 3, 1.1 million evacuated. The Tyranid bioships were visible now, massive organic constructs that moved through the void on solar winds and gravitic manipulation. Their approach was steady, inevitable, patient. They didn't need to hurry. Their prey was trapped on a single planet. Day 5, 2.4 million evacuated. Kal-El was operating on reserves he didn't know he had. Sleep was impossible. Every second wasted meant people died. He grabbed nutrition when he could, consuming ration packs mid-flight, his body converting matter to energy with desperate efficiency. The cultists had noticed the evacuation pattern. They began massing at his next predicted landing zones, forcing him to fight through ambushes before each pickup. It cost precious seconds. Seconds multiplied by thousands of trips became hours. Hours meant lives. Day 6, 2.8 million evacuated, 200,000 remaining. The Tyranid bioships entered high orbit, their shadow falling across Typhon's reach like a death sentence. Kal-El felt their presence, vast, hungry, utterly alien. No malice, no hatred, just hunger on a scale that defied comprehension. Guilliman's Vox transmission crackled through the communicator Techmarine Volus had provided. Kal-El, the bioships are deploying spore capsules. You have 12 hours before planetary infestation becomes irreversible. Recommend immediate withdrawal. Not finished, Kal-El transmitted back, his voice raw from inhaling toxic atmosphere repeatedly. You've saved more than anyone thought possible. Don't die proving a point to the Inquisition. Not proving a point, saving people. He descended again into hell, gathered another 1,000 survivors from Hive Octavius's collapsing underhive, carried them through atmosphere now thick with descending spores, living missiles that would burrow into the planet and spawn Tyranid organisms. One spore hit him mid-flight, its acidic exterior burning through his suit's shoulder. He crushed it with one hand and kept flying. 200,000 people, 200 trips, 12 hours. The math was still impossible, but Kal-El had stopped caring about math. He cared about the child crying in her mother's arms as he lifted them to safety. The old man who whispered prayers to the Emperor while Kal-El carried his group to orbit. The PDF soldier who saluted him with tears streaming down her face. Every single one of them mattered. He would save them all or die trying. Hour 8. 112,000 remaining. Kal-El's hands shook as he gathered another group from Hive Decimus. His vision doubled momentarily before his Kryptonian physiology forced correction. The star's radiation was too weak, too distant, filtered through too much atmospheric corruption. He was running on fumes and willpower. The tyrannid spores had begun their terrible work. Below, the planet's surface writhed as bioorganisms erupted from impact craters. Kal-El's telescopic vision caught horrors he'd never imagined. Creatures designed purely to kill and consume, spawning from the biomass the cult had helpfully provided through their own corrupted flesh. A roar split the air, not sound exactly, but psychic pressure that made reality shudder. The hive mind had arrived in full force, and it had noticed him. Kal-El felt something vast and terrible turn its attention toward him. Not intelligent in any way he recognized, more like a hurricane becoming aware of a particular raindrop. The hive mind perceived him as an anomaly, a variable disrupting the harvest equation. It wanted him removed. Tyrannid warrior organisms erupted from the nearest spore deployment. 3-meter-tall nightmares of chitin and blades, moving with horrifying coordination. They leaped at him mid-flight, claws extended to rend and tear. Kal-El twisted in mid-air, his burden of 1,000 survivors clutched carefully against his chest. He couldn't fight while carrying them. Any violence risked crushing the very people he was trying to save. So he flew faster, dodging through swarms of flying organisms that filled the sky like a locust plague engineered by malevolent gods. A talon scored across his back, cutting through suit and skin. Pain flared. Real pain. The kind that meant actual damage. These creatures' claws carried something beyond physical sharpness. Bioacids, molecular disruptors, whatever they were, they hurt. He reached orbit, deposited his group on the platform where Imperial crew scrambled to process new arrivals, and dove immediately back toward the planet. No rest. No time. Hour 10. 63,000 remaining. The planet below was more tyrannid than human now. Whole hive sections had been consumed, their materials repurposed into living factories that spawned more horrors. Kal-El's extraction points were shrinking. Only 3 fortified zones remained defensible. Guilliman's voice crackled through the Vox again, strained with something the Primarch rarely showed. Concern. Kal-El, your vital signs are critical. Your energy signature is dropping below safe operational parameters. You need to withdraw. Almost done, Kal-El transmitted back. His own voice sounded distant to his ears. You're dying. Not before I finish. He descended into Hive Primus again, the largest remaining enclave. 40,000 survivors huddled in the last defensible position, surrounded by biocorruption that pulsed and grew with obscene speed. The PDF commander he'd met on day 1 stood at the barricades, her remaining arm holding a laser gun she'd fired until the power pack was empty. "You came back," she said, something like wonder in her voice. "Of course I did. Get your people ready, everyone who's left. There are 40,000 of us. You can't watch me." Kal-El did something he'd only attempted once before, during the Apocalypse invasion, when Darkseid's forces threatened to overwhelm Earth. He reached deep into his cellular reserves, forcing his Kryptonian physiology to convert stored solar energy with catastrophic efficiency. His body began to glow with golden light, not heat vision, but something deeper. Raw solar radiation bleeding from every cell. He grabbed the first 1,000, flew them to orbit, descended, grabbed another 1,000. His muscles screamed, his vision blurred. His heart, singular, powerful, Kryptonian, hammered against his ribs with irregular rhythm. Another 1,000. Another. The Tyranids swarmed thicker now, recognizing the threat. A bio-titan, a massive organism the size of a building, lunged at him. Kal-El's heat vision carved through its carapace, even as claws raked his side. He didn't slow. Hour 11. 23,000 remaining. His suit was shredded. His skin bore cuts that should have been impossible to inflict. He was bleeding. Not much, but the fact that he was bleeding at all spoke to how depleted he'd become. "Kal-El, the bioships are entering final harvest position," Guilliman transmitted. "In 30 minutes, they will begin atmospheric consumption. Anything still on the surface will be absorbed. You must leave now." 23,000 people, 23 trips, 30 minutes. Kal-El looked at the survivors crowded in Hive Primus's last defendable section. He saw their faces, terrified, hopeful, desperate. They'd watched him return again and again, defying impossibility through sheer, stubborn refusal to accept that they were doomed. They believed in him. He couldn't let them die believing. "I'm not leaving anyone behind," Kal-El said. And then he did something that would have made every physicist in his home universe weep. He flew faster than he'd ever flown before. Not just supersonic, not just hypersonic. He pushed his depleted body past every safety limit, every biological warning, every rational constraint. The air around him ignited from friction. His skin burned. His cells screamed as they converted the last dregs of stored solar energy into kinetic force. He became a golden comet streaking between surface and orbit, moving so fast that time itself seemed to slow. 23,000 people, 1,000 at a time. 23 trips compressed into 28 minutes through speed that should have been fatal. His hands grabbed survivors with microsecond precision. His body absorbed impacts that would shatter starship hulls. His mind, pushed beyond Kryptonian limits, processed flight paths, avoiding debris, tracking Tyranid organisms, all while counting down the seconds until atmospheric consumption began. 27th minute, last trip. Final 1,000 survivors clutched against his chest. The Bio-Titan lunged one more time. Kal-El didn't dodge. Dodging would cost seconds he didn't have. He took the hit, let claws sink into his shoulder, and kept flying. He broke orbit with 3 seconds to spare. Below, the Tyranid bioships began their harvest. Massive organic mechanisms drinking atmosphere, consuming biomass, transforming an entire planet into fuel for the Hive fleet's endless hunger. Kal-El deposited the final 1,000 survivors on the orbital platform and collapsed. His vision darkened at the edges. His body had nothing left to give. The last thing he heard before unconsciousness claimed him was Guilliman's voice, carrying something the Primarch rarely expressed: genuine awe. He did it. Emperor preserve us, he actually did it. Kal-El woke to sunlight. Real sunlight, not filtered through polluted atmosphere or weakened by stellar distance, but pure concentrated solar radiation. His eyes opened to find himself in a medical bay bathed in artificial yellow sun spectrum light. Tech Marine Volus stood nearby, monitoring equipment that hummed with carefully calibrated energy output. Lord Commander's orders, Volus explained, noting Kal-El's confusion. We redirected power from 3 decks to replicate your home star's radiation signature. Your cellular recovery has been remarkable. 72 hours unconscious, but your wounds have completely healed. Kal-El sat up slowly, testing his restored strength. The cuts were gone. The exhaustion had faded. His body had drunk in the artificial sunlight and rebuilt itself with Kryptonian efficiency. He felt whole again, physically at least. The survivors from Typhon's Reach? All 3 billion accounted for and processed, Volus reported. Fleet logistics are strained, but Lord Commander Guilliman has requisitioned transport capacity from adjacent sectors. The evacuees are being distributed to underpopulated agri-worlds. They will live. 3 billion lives. Kal-El had saved them all, but the cost had been measured in pain he'd rarely experienced. This universe fought back against hope with vicious efficiency. The door opened and Guilliman entered, followed by Inquisitor Covenant. The Primarch's expression was unreadable. Covenant's face carried something that might have been grudging respect. You honored your word, Covenant said, without preamble. 3 billion souls evacuated. 0 significant biomass left for Tyranid harvest. The bioships departed the system 48 hours ago, searching for more profitable feeding grounds. She paused, and something complex crossed her features. I have never witnessed such a feat. In 10,000 years of Imperial history, no single individual has accomplished what you did. I did what needed to be done, Kal-El replied, carefully. You proved your value to the Imperium, Covenant continued, but you also proved something far more dangerous. That individual capability can exceed institutional capacity. You saved 3 billion people through personal power rather than through faith in the Emperor, adherence to imperial structure, or recognition of rightful authority. Kal-El felt the trap closing. You're saying my success is a problem. I'm saying it creates a precedent, Covenant corrected. If one being can save 3 billion through individual action, what does that say about an Imperium that regularly writes off billions as acceptable losses? What happens when Imperial citizens begin to question whether faith in the Emperor is sufficient when a Xenos from beyond the stars proves more effective? That sounds like a problem with your system, not with me, Kal-El said, unable to keep the edge from his voice. Indeed, Covenant's smile was sharp and cold, which is why I am recommending that you be placed under Lord Commander Guilliman's direct authority as a strategic asset of the Indomitus Crusade. You will operate with autonomy in tactical decisions, but will accept strategic direction from Imperial command. You will not contradict Imperial doctrine publicly. You will not undermine faith in the Emperor. You will be the miracle we can control. Kal-El looked at Guilliman. And you agree with this? The Primarch's expression remained neutral, but his eyes carried deeper meaning. I agree that your capabilities are too valuable to waste and too dangerous to leave completely autonomous. I also agree that forcing you into chains would be both morally questionable and tactically foolish. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. What I propose is an alliance between equals. You operate according to your principles. I provide strategic intelligence and resource coordination. We save as many lives as possible while navigating the Imperium's political realities. And when our principles conflict, Kal-El asked, then we have the difficult conversations that people with power must have, Guilliman replied. I will not order you to commit atrocities. You will not sabotage Imperial operations you find distasteful. We find the narrow path between idealism and pragmatism, or we both fail in our own ways. Kal-El considered this carefully. Everything in him rebelled against accepting authority from anyone, especially an institution built on brutal calculus and religious fanaticism. But Guilliman wasn't offering submission. He was offering partnership. Flawed, complicated, fraught with potential conflict, but genuine. I'll work with you, Kal-El said finally, but I won't compromise on certain things. I won't kill innocents. I won't accept genocide as policy. I won't worship your emperor or pretend I'm anything other than what I am. I would not ask you to, Guilliman replied. Your moral clarity is precisely what makes you valuable. The Imperium has spent 10,000 years justifying necessary evils until we forgot what good looked like. Perhaps you can remind us. Covenant's expression soured. This sets a dangerous precedent, Lord Commander. This entire crusade is a dangerous precedent, Guilliman countered. A Primarch returned from death to lead an Imperium that worships his father as a god. Xenos technology integrated into our forces, tactical alliances with alien races. If we survive the next century, it will be because we learn to adapt rather than calcify. He turned back to Kal-El. The Imperium Nihilus holds 500 billion souls cut off from Terra by the Great Rift. They face chaos incursions, Xenos invasions, and resource collapse. I cannot save them all, but together we might save more than I could alone. Kal-El stood, testing his restored strength. The artificial sunlight had rebuilt him, but it had also given him time to think. This universe was darker than anything he'd known. Its heroes were brutal by necessity. Its victories were measured in billions saved versus trillions lost. Everything he'd learned about heroism, about justice, about doing the right thing, all of it was being tested against a galaxy that seemed designed to break hope. But 3 billion people were alive because he'd refused to accept their deaths as inevitable. That meant something. Maybe it meant everything. Where do we start? Kal-El asked. Guilliman activated the hololithic display. 1,000 star systems appeared, each one marked with threat assessments and casualty projections. Everywhere, the Primarch said. We start everywhere and see how far hope can actually reach when backed by sufficient force. Covenant observed them both with calculating eyes. I will be watching, Xenos. Prove that my faith in Lord Commander Guilliman's judgment is not misplaced. Prove that miracles can be trusted. I'm not a miracle, Kal-El replied. I'm just someone who refuses to give up on people. In this galaxy, Guilliman said quietly, that might be the greatest miracle of all. The Macraga's honor hung in the void between stars, its plasma drives burning as the Indomitus Crusade prepared for its next deployment. In the observation deck, Kal-El stood beside Roboute Guilliman, watching the Imperium's warships maneuver with the precision of an organism that had learned to function through constant warfare. 7 worlds had been saved in the 3 weeks since Typhon's reach. Not through exterminatus, averted or acceptable losses minimized, but through actual salvation, populations evacuated, threats neutralized, hope delivered where strategic calculus had written off billions. The numbers were still impossibly small against the scale of the galaxy's suffering, but they represented something the Imperium had nearly forgotten: the idea that losses weren't always inevitable. The Inquisition has filed 17 formal complaints about your methods, Guilliman observed, his tone carrying dry amusement. Apparently, your refusal to execute suspected heretics pending proper investigation undermines their authority. They wanted me to kill 300 people based on probable corruption, Kal-El replied. I scanned them. 47 showed signs of chaos taint. The rest were just hungry and desperate. If that undermines the Inquisition's authority, maybe their authority needs undermining. Careful, Guilliman warned, though without real heat. That kind of talk gets planets purged. Only if people accept that purging planets is a reasonable response to disagreement. The Primarch was silent for a moment, then spoke with unusual candor. You've been in this universe less than a month, and you've already made me question doctrines I've accepted for 300 years. That's either the most valuable thing that could happen to the Imperium, or the most dangerous. Can't it be both? Guilliman's expression shifted, something that might have been a smile if Primarchs smiled easily. Yes, I suspect it will be both. A Vox alert interrupted them. Captain Sicarius's voice carried urgency. My lord, we're receiving distress calls from the Cadian sector. Multiple worlds under simultaneous chaos assault. They're requesting immediate reinforcement. Guilliman's tactical mind was already processing fleet deployment vectors, resource allocation, acceptable response times. Kal-El could see the calculations happening behind the Primarch's eyes. The same brutal mathematics that governed every Imperial decision. How many ships can we divert without compromising the primary Crusade objectives? Guilliman asked. 3 battle groups maximum, my lord. Insufficient to relieve all threatened worlds. Strategic Command recommends we prioritize the Forge worlds and accept agricultural losses. Accept losses. The phrase hung in the air like a death sentence, delivered with bureaucratic efficiency. Kal-El looked at Guilliman. The Primarch looked back. How fast can you reach the Cadian sector? Guilliman asked quietly. Faster than your fleet. Then go. Save who you can save. I'll coordinate fleet support for the worlds you can't reach in time. Guilliman's voice carried something new. Not quite hope, but perhaps the memory of what hope used to feel like. Show them that the impossible is merely difficult. Kal-El nodded and turned toward the hangar bay. Before he left, Guilliman spoke again. Kal-El, in this galaxy, paragons don't survive. They break, or they fall, or they become monsters wearing virtue's face. You will be tested in ways that make Typhon's reach look gentle. The Chaos Gods will learn your weaknesses. The Inquisition will wait for you to fail. The galaxy itself will try to prove that hope is foolish and mercy is suicide. I know. And yet you continue? Kal-El met the Primarch's eyes, the gaze of a Genhanced demigod who had led humanity's armies across the stars. who had watched empires burn and brothers fall, who had died and returned to find his life's work corrupted into nightmare. "I continue," Kal-El said, "because someone has to prove that surviving doesn't require becoming the thing we're fighting against. Your Imperium learned to endure by becoming brutal. Maybe I can help it remember how to endure while staying human." "We are not human," Guilliman reminded him. "Neither of us." "Then maybe we can remember how to be humane." Kal-El left the observation deck at walking speed, though he could move faster than thought. Some things required deliberation, not speed. Behind him, Guilliman watched the blue and red figure disappear into the Macragge's honors corridors. A being from beyond the stars, carrying principles that shouldn't survive contact with the 41st millennium's reality. An impossible variable in an equation that had been solved through 10,000 years of necessary evil. The Lord Commander of the Imperium had spent 3 centuries calculating acceptable losses. Perhaps it was time to calculate what might be gained if someone finally refused to accept that any loss was truly acceptable. In the distance, stars burned. Billions suffered. Darkness pressed in from every direction. And somewhere between the weight of brutal pragmatism and the light of impossible idealism, 2 paragons from different worlds began forging a path that neither could walk alone. The galaxy would resist, chaos would corrupt, the Inquisition would condemn. Reality itself would fight back against the dangerous idea that hope could be tactical doctrine. But Roboute Guilliman had learned something in his months working alongside Kal-El. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you could do to an enemy was refuse to fight on their terms. The Imperium had survived 10,000 years by accepting darkness as inevitable. Perhaps it was time to learn whether it could thrive by proving that light, however impossible, was still worth fighting for. The Emperor protects. More stories await.